Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast. It's 2026. That means this is the first episode of the new season. I'm still Dan Hilton. He's still Matt Pippin Auletta. And for a number of reasons, this is not a normal scheduled podcast. I think it's kind of emergency would be number one because one, roster day dropped. So that means we have access to all the rosters. We can finally tell you, what was in my throat, I can finally say those names out to you. Very excited to do that. Two is that we just missed you. So it is time to get this season started. And three, in my lap here, for those watching, is my dog Skippy. He finally decided to nap. So that means it is podcast time. And time again to say hello to Matt Pippin Auletta. So Pippin, you fired up the old podcast mic. How was your off season?
We back. The off season was fine. Pulling back the curtain a little, I don't follow a ton of Frisbee stuff. Like once club nationals kind of wraps up in the fall, I kind of just coast for a little bit. I know some people, it's more of like their full-time thing. They're all in. I kind of ramp back up as the players do with the season. The Atkins signing was like, okay, there was some chatter in some group chats, like cool, whatever. When we got the biggest marquee signing, I almost picked up my phone and texted you immediately. I think if I wasn't playing with my children, I would have. And then the next time I picked up my phone, you had said emergency podcast time. And I was like, yeah, we're back, baby. We are back. The winter is over. I purposely put on this ridiculous Hawaiian shirt because it feels like springtime. Daan de Marie just sounds like a beautiful name, like spring name. I don't know. We're here. We're back. I even got the bobbleheads out of the basement for I don't know. I was excited.
Yeah, I mean, God bless the college game, but very much like I call some college basketball as well, but I watch a lot of NBA. And so, again, as much as I do enjoy watching the college game, you can only watch so much before your patience gets tested. Because again, these are children making children decisions, and it is time to watch the pros go back to work. Sprinkled in with those college players as well. I mean, the really special ones. But Dan Demarnay is not one of those. He was 24 last season, will be 25 this season. That is the big name you're talking about. And we're going to start with the Empire. And they've got, yes, we will get throughout this, not this show, but the next few weeks. And as the season kicks off, we'll say a lot of the depth signings and players that will round out the roster and things like that. And who the other moves around the periphery that is missing, who might be arriving later in the season, things like that. But four big names kind of to start with. And I'd say two big names who arguably would be the two biggest signings for any team this season or off season. And then two other, veteran quality experienced players. But as much as Alex Atkins came first, so Atkins numerically, or chronologically, we should be starting with him, maybe the premier throwing defender in the sport. He signed this offseason. But unfortunately for him, and thanks actually, if I'm not mistaken, in part to some of his recruiting strategy, we're instead, as you mentioned, talking about Dan Demarnay. Last season's Rookie of the Year, All UFA first team, MVP finalist, the runner-up to fellow Belgian superstar Toby de Kran last season. And numbers are boring. They are. But I'm contractually
just say them once. Yeah, just rattle them off real quick.
He only played 10 games. He had 33 assists, 45 goals, 19 blocks, 95.79% completion on 273 completions, 1,933 passing yards, 3,235 receiving yards, over 5,100 yards of total offense, and 11. Okay, this one breaks my brain. 11 total turns and a league leading in 10 games plus 83 on a plus minus.
Sounds like a down year for me. I don't know. Maybe
we're saying video game numbers, but historically, I have no basis to this. Somebody can correct me, but based on even his total offense that he contributed, plus the 19 blocks, plus the plus 83 plus minus, like for a bunch of players, for like 90% of the players that ever played in the league, those are almost career numbers. And he did that
probably more. Probably higher percentage. Yeah.
I was being fair to Frisbee players in general. But yeah in 10 games, he pretty much completed ultimate in 10 games last season. And then on the other side of it, he went to the club game and he put on a show that was somehow as impressive or more impressive than what he did in the UFA. And we have seen in the past, there have been some up and down struggles of international stars. We've seen it But he showed up to Chicago last year and was the best player on an undefeated regular season team. And I'm going to throw it to you in a second because as people can hear on the pod, I won't cut it out. Skippy decided that, he's tired of hearing me talk about Desmarais, or maybe he's just excited. But what I will say as I throw it to you here, this is in reference to Bo. Desmarais might have the best fitness of any player I've seen in Ultimate in my time. Again, that's like, I mean, again, and my understanding of the sport goes back like 25 years that I can just like rattle off names. And he might, next to Bo, be the fittest player. Not even like most, even in shape. I just mean that guy, his game has no weaknesses. He's known for out jumping defenders and layup grabs, but like he can just play both sides of the ball. And especially the club game, he plays both two-way in a way that you and I, we used to do it back in college, whatever, but like we've seen now in the modern game, you can't really do that for too many points. This dude can. His fitness is unbelievable, and his game has no weaknesses.
Sure, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I keep thinking about how more players should play two ways, and especially on this Empire team, I think that was an issue last year. They couldn't figure out who was actually supposed to play where. They had a bunch of players kind of back and forth on offense and defense, and they never really found their true identity. And Calvin Brown came in, and I felt like the whole team like rallied around that, and it was like the piece they needed. And then he got hurt, and then everything kind of fell apart again. So, as I've said before, I'm really excited to see how this all shakes out. I think now is one of the most exciting times. I think the team is going to be good again. How good we'll have to see, but it's super exciting to see how it all might come together. Like, are these all-star caliber defenders just going to play defense? Like, I don't know if that's what this current iteration of Empire needs. They might need to just stack a bunch of dudes on offense and let them play some deep points on occasion. I mean, the defense didn't generate as many blocks as it needed to last year, but yeah, again, there's just so many different iterations, and I'll be excited to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, I mean, if you're super fit, to your point, you can play more points on both sides.
Yeah, I do have numbers to back this up too. I'll mention too, his throwing, that being Desmarais, is pretty incredible. And as I said, what he did at international competitions with moon catchers just again felt impossible. Just the responsibility that one individual player has. And then what I'll say too to that, I'll add the fitness part. His motor might actually be his best skill as well. He played 25.75 points per game in the last 4 games of the year. And for context, there again, the Empire's, we'll say, 2 biggest two-way players from the last 2 seasons, Ben Yot and Jack Williams, if they hit like 25 points in a game, or 22, I should say, if they hit like 22, 23 points a game, I'm like, whoa, Jack and Yot really had to be extended in that game. But he averaged 25.75 points per game in the last 4 games of the season.
But pace of play in some of the other divisions is a little different. And when you're playing a lot of the small ball possession-oriented offense, like the Breeze and the Glory, the games are slower and they have fewer points played. So just keeping it a little honest.
Yeah. No, very true. Great point. And I'll add to what you said, adding on to that, the Empire might have now the best collection of two-way players in the entire league. Between Atkins, Jack, I still throw Yacht in there. I mean, defensively, what he does do. And then Randolph and Desmarais. So I think probably of the top 15 two-way players in the league, the Empire have 5 of them at this point. And I think when we talk about problem solving in the modern game, I would expect Atkins will play defense. I would expect that to happen. Again, that allows like Yacht just to be able to focus on offense. And even I know they play different positions, obviously around the disc, but we're talking about the matchups that they would take defensively. But what's interesting to me about Desmarais and Jack now is that you have 2 of the best problem solvers in the modern game. And depending on how the rest of the roster shakes out, again, I said the Empire might have in total some of the best problem solvers out there. And what I mean by that is when you need something to happen, and even the best players, there's moments where you're going, oh, I need to find eyes. I need to find someone. And when you looked at what Chicago did last season and then what the Empire have had with Jack, like Desmarais and Jack might be the 2 best, I'd say, bailout set of eyes in the entire league that you want to lock eyes with. Like Jack will get me out of trouble. Desmarais is going to get me out of trouble. And then down the roster, the effects of that. I think this really does benefit guys like Matt LeBar, Oliver Chartok, Sam Jonas, who were pushed into two-way roles at times last season. Now in games, those points are going to be eaten up by Atkins and or Marrée. And so that allows that trio to focus on wherever they land. So if Matt LeBar goes back to defense, he can focus on that, or the one side of the disc for the matchup they're in, as opposed to having to kind of force things. But also that allows them, hey, Marrée, you've got to play offense. Let's say he was playing defense in the first half of a game and saying, okay, well, actually, we're going to need to play offense for the second half. You could just move Ollie over, and Ollie can play defense for the rest of that game. He's done it before. He can do it. Matt LeBar, you can switch over to the D-line or you know what I'm saying? Like, depending on what the game needs, you have even your depth pieces in Jonas and LeBar and Chartok can play both ways, which I think is really, really interesting as to how Anthony Nunez and Matt Cat Stevens, to your point, are going to decide how are we going to approach offense and defense and those lineups from game to game.
Hey Empire fans, ShopEmpireUltimate.com is your home for all the latest Empire gear. From hats to hoodies to discs and coaching, ShopEmpireUltimate.com is the best place to get yourself ready for the next Empire game.
Hola Empire aficionados, ShopEmpireUltimate.com es tu casa para todo lo nuevo de Empire. Desde cachuchas, a sudaderas, a frisbees y entrenadores. ShopEmpireUltimate.com es el lugar para que te alistes para el siguiente juego de Empire.
Yeah, and last year, another big issue was if you ignore all the numbers about blocks or conversion rate or all these things, it was, even when some guys were available like Jack and Antoine, they were not 100% for a good chunk of games early on. So consistency was just all over the place. So, having more dynamic players who can do more, they should be able to figure out where, I guess what I need to see from the team is I need them to figure out where everybody's going to play earlier this year. Some adjustments happen as you're going, just organically, naturally, but I think if they can figure out a little more concrete of like, this is our offense, 9 or so guys, and this is our defense, 9, 10 guys, then I think they'll be in a better position to start this year. And, if Calvin Brown comes back from, the injury rehab and can slap back into offense and be the dynamic, just like more of a pure handler kind of that they need, then so be it. That's great. But yeah, they just need to figure it out a little earlier, because they do have a lot of people who can play two ways. And, Antoine Davis has like become just, a defensive player the last few years, but people forget he played offense out in San Francisco and Atlanta for a bit. And like, he's super fast. Did you see the video of him smoking Alex Atkins in a race? And he's like taunting him like, I'm not even full speed or whatever. Like, I love that. So, if the Empire D-line struggled to score after they got blocks last year, so maybe you move some of those pieces around. Antoine has, over the last few years, like massively improved completion percentage. I think just playing safer and maturing as a player. So like, that is also a player that you could maybe play on offense and get very effective spacing and production out of, and then you can move somebody who's a little more dynamic as a thrower onto that D-line and pair them with, whoever else ends up over there, and maybe that D-line can become a lot more dangerous again, instead of just like the D-line that needed to dink and dunk and try and get all the way down there. That was an issue. So these signings just kind of unlock a lot of moves, and there's a lot that can be done.
You have mentioned Calvin Brown, and it should be noted that even if he were to return this season from injury, it wouldn't even be until midway. And because he's coming back from ACL, you don't know what you don't know how long it will take him to reintegrate himself to that sport. And it would be completely understandable if he took this season off and saw where he was going to go from there. So again, you can't make promises on certain names like Calvin Brown, and then also that some of that depth that we were talking about in those players that did move the disc on defense, like Sam Alston, like Tristan Yarder. Not sure about their status either. So the Empire does look around the periphery. There are some new names that, again, will have to kind of stake their claim as to what they're going to do. Ben Dameron also had played one game, is not yet on the roster. So it is still early days, but to your point, yeah, my big question in terms of how the way that the defense moved the disc is, Alex Atkins and John Randolph are just radically different offensive pieces when you're on defense. So where will John Randolph play? Will it be a Randolph and Atkins, we'll say, backfield for the defense, or are you going to play Randolph on offense? And how is that going to work? Because let's get into the two other big signings here outside of Atkins and Demray, or we'll say experienced UFA players. I also real quick want to mention that year 2 of Ben Simmons and Jacob Cowan in the UFA, and then year 2 of Oliver Fay on defense with the Empire, if he can stay healthy as well. You're talking about improving a defense that last season surrendered 19.69 goals per game, their poorest average since 2018, allowing opponents to complete 63.2% of their hucks, which is a step back. It's almost a whole percentage less than what was allowed in 2024. And then, of course, the playoff blowout against DC, and that I know Anthony Nunez is a good friend, and I can tell you he did not watch that game. He does not watch those games, and so
that was just a bad game. Everything went wrong. Everything went wrong. Let's not even speak of it.
But in that game, 23-12, that defeat, the Breeze connected on 9 of their 11 deep shots, and I could say that the defense for the Empire and the pieces they've added, again, if Oliver Fay can stay healthy as well, that's just. I don't think that's going to be the plan again this season. But two of the guys that can help them move the disc defensively in Braden Eberhard from Salt Lake and Elliot Moore from Austin, these are just two trustworthy handlers. And as the Empire has changed over the seasons, those names that we would always talk about in, we'll say, the championship seasons, whether it was Josue Aloro or Ben Katz, like you had those defenders who could also just move the disc for you, be trustworthy hands. And so whether Eberhard or Moore play offense or defense, I would assume that they're going to continue. I'm going to assume that they're going to switch over to D-line from their positions as O-line players for their respective teams. But again, now you can, if you want, ask a big question about Solomon Reshmeyer-Bailey, but I think he might be too invaluable to move off that Empire O-line.
I had some notes about him, and maybe signing day isn't exactly the right time. We'll see how it goes. He's a very good player. There's no doubt about that. But I was checking the math on it. Like 2 to 3% of his 500-something passes were assists. And he's not scoring a lot of goals. And every offense does need somebody who just like facilitates, keeps it moving, doesn't need to do the like high reward kind of things. But
Are you talking about SRB? You're talking about SRB?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But so like, just there was no dynamic throwing. That's not a great way to say, because there were some good throws, like impressive throws or whatever, but he was never really unlocking the defense. He was just kind of like moving the disc. And when the team struggled and everybody else wasn't doing so great, sure, he's completing a lot of his passes. You have to not turn the disc over to do well, but he just he wasn't pushing the team to where it needed to be. And I don't necessarily think you're going to put him on defense, but maybe if he can contribute on defense and help maintain possession and get some breaks just with that tireless work ethic, like maybe that becomes a little more useful if other players can play offense. It's kind of crazy to think that he wouldn't be on the offense, but I don't know. If you're adding other players into your offense who can kind of unlock the defense in certain ways, probably SRB fits in great, because then he doesn't need to try and do those things. He can just kind of facilitate those players, similar to how he would facilitate Ryan Osgar, Elliot Chartok, just the like mid-range throw options who would just then break everything open. But who knows? Maybe he has a home on defense where he then helps that defense that struggled just not turn it over, play smart.
Well, that's where he played in his first season. He played on the D-line, and I thought there was questions that's where he would stay throughout his time. I will say, like, this team is also going to be tested very early. Again, they've got some players like Ethan Lehman who will, as the season goes on, come back from college and play larger roles. But week 2, Sunday, May the 10th, it's already DC Breeze at the New York Empire. And then they will play against Chicago on July 10th. And that is the Friday night Frisbee showdown when Desmarais, in theory, returns. Because again, that's going to be, I think, one of the huge questions that we will not know throughout this season is how many games with international competition this summer as well, how many games will Desmarais play? And so for the Empire, if you're the 2 or the 3 seed, because Desmarais only played, 8 or 9 regular season games, you still might be comfortable knowing what you could potentially be at your ceiling. And that changes what the Empire can be. We are going to talk so much more about the Empire. We just wanted to throw out some of the questions, give you some of the signings, some of the big names. Again, we'll work down the depth chart as the preseason goes on, and maybe I can bother. Yeah, I do. I kind of just poke them, Matt Cat Stevens and Anthony Nunez, and say, what can you give me? What am I allowed to say? And I'll just poke them about other names and other players as you go on. But we're going to end this show with a grab bag. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, wait, no, what you got? Sorry, no, you go, and then I do have
I'm not stopping. Yeah. I know what you want to say. I know who you want to talk about.
Oh, maybe not.
Are we going to Austin?
He's on the list. Yeah, it was on the list. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Great.
Ryan, so I know you're going to listen, Ryan, because I know you and Mike.
Let me say it first.
You got. Oh, sorry. Different Ryan.
You're taking personal attacks before I can even announce what it is. So this is a grab bag of big moves around the league so far, and what Matt Pippin Auletta is saying right now is this is a personal and private message to Ryan Dross that's going to come out on the Empire podcast. He has signed a 1-year deal with Austin, returning Matt Armar, Duncan Fitzgerald, and Evan Switek. We are actually going to do the rest of the East moves first, but no, we actually have to start with Ryan Dross going after 11 seasons with New York Empire, played 1 game last season, and he's got a 1-year deal with Austin, which you know that he's living in Texas, but please give me your thoughts on your good friend Ryan Dross and his signing or his new appearance in a new shirt, because unbeknownst to Ryan, and this might actually hurt his contract, is it saying in his contract he's still allowed to wear his old Empire hat that I think might at this point be stuck to his head? Because he has to change that old Empire hat.
That's a great question. You know what? I will pose that question to the group. I don't know. Yeah, they're going to have to pry that thing off his head. When I first saw the news, there were some texts, and the first one, I was going to text Mike separately first and say, like, what do you think about this? For those that may not know, Mike is Ryan's twin brother. And before I could even do it, Mike had already posted a picture of it, and he just said, "This feels wrong." So, everybody liked it. It got some traction. It feels a lot like old Patrick Ewing wearing a Magic jersey.
It does.
There were some other comparisons to other athletes. Mike appropriately said it was like Joe Mauer, the Twins catcher, being on a different team. He famously played his whole career with the Twins, and they love the Twins because they are twins. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Ryan. It is what it is. I will truly tune in to watch, because why wouldn't I? He's awesome. We'll see how it goes, but it's disgusting. I hate it.
Well, here's the thing. I will say that having the number one, number two. Mike is number 2. The number 1 block getter in UFA history. There is a world where those two could have had their 1 game last season and rode off in the sunset. But instead, the fact that Ryan still wants to do it and still wants to play in the UFA, it's not a bad thing to have, again, one of the best defensive players numerically of all time in the league to continue playing. That's not a bad thing. So no. I'm excited to see what Ryan can do down in Austin. Now, we're coming back to the East real quick. For DC, it's Sean Mott from Philly to DC. No Rowan yet on any rosters, whether DC or Boston, which you'd assume are going to be, if he decides to play this season, it's one of those two. They've also added a U24 Dutch player in V. Van de Brink. I say it very fast because I haven't got pronunciations just yet on that. Boston has added Thomas Edmonds from DC, but there's no Tanner Johnson go on their roster, but they also added Frankie Fernandez from Atlanta, Kai DiLorenzo from Madison, and Leonard Decan, the brother of Decana from the brother from Belgium, brother of Tobe. So they've added some pieces, also Edmonds, but no Tanner Johnson goes. So some changes.
I didn't even realize, because this stuff is just happening very recently. I didn't even realize that Tanner Johnson Go wasn't on that roster. That's a big hit for them.
Potentially, yep.
Yeah, no, I think they're right if he doesn't end up signing.
There are still things up in the air for all those teams, but yeah, again, the notable omissions. Again, no Tanner Johnson-Grow, no Rowan McDonald. Teams just looking different. For Toronto, they lost the Lewis brothers, but Muraoka is back from Japan, and your old friend Isaiah Masek Kelly, who you did plenty of wars with the Empire and Toronto, he has returned. Again, speaking of, very much like Ryan Dross, hey, let's run it back. But again, Ryan's doing a different location. Masek Kelly is back. And then Malik Ajer Samar is returning to Montreal. So that will potentially bolster them. But again, it's no disrespect to the rest of the East, but the big names that have been signed is the Empire. It has become an arms race. And the big question, I think, for me, for the East in general, is about DC. It's that Boston, I think still obviously with Babbitt and Tobe, like they're still going to be very much looking like Boston, even without Tanner Johnson Go. Again, adding pieces like in Edmonds. They won the championship. They deserve our respect. The Empire have now added, again, some of the best players in the entire league. And we'll see how quickly the Empire throw it all together. But right now it feels like there's a big two. And let's see, because DC is also going to have new coaching staff as well in charge. Like it is very much a succession plan though. So yes, they had people in place to take that role, but they are going to look different. DC is this season. Again, this is now. Yeah.
No, sorry. I just feel like that team is so well, DC is just so well put together, and
I agree.
All those players, just so much experience with each other, and they have veteran leadership with Wodach still and other players, AJ Mary. I just feel like that team is going to be totally fine, and they're going to be a problem for the other top teams in the East all year.
And then the question for Philly is, can Philly, you could feel like when you look at their roster, and again, it's no disrespect to the players on their roster, but it does feel, especially with the Grossbergs, still at Georgia Tech for a few games, it feels like that first part of the season, they are going to be standing on the edge of that cliff. And, it's funny because even 2 seasons ago when they started 0-6, they still made a push to the playoffs. And they do have that Philly grit, that Philly response. And, you count them out at your own peril, but that's a team that you worry that, if they wind up losing 3 or 4 of the games that they've won in previous seasons, they're going to find themselves much closer to the cellar of the East playoffs than near the top. And I think very quickly this could become those are our 3 playoff teams out of the East between DC, New York, and Boston. And we kind of blink and that's what it is. So that would be just my fear for parity in the East. But that also means that when the big 3, if you want to call it, match up with each other, those games matter so much more because they're going to have an outsized role on playoff seeding and who's hosting and things like that.
And those interdivisional games then too, they hold a lot of weight. I mean, every game holds a lot of weight. It's a 12-game season. It just is. It is what it is. It all matters a lot. But and you catch Philly on a day where they're hot and you're cold. All of a sudden that could be one bad loss for any of the top teams, and you just never know how it all shakes out.
Yeah. Actually more of the player movement and interesting things happen around the other divisions, particularly in the Central. Well, let's stick in the South first. Will Selfridge has moved from Salt Lake to Atlanta, giving Austin Taylor, what was that old Madden call? I mean, I haven't played Madden in 15 years, but there was what was it called? It was like the play action all out play that you just spammed. You know what I'm talking about? It was just like, it was a play action all out and you sent all your wide receivers downfield. I can assume Austin Taylor just going to field the disc, fake the pass to Olsen, and then with Alec Wilson-Holiday and Will Selfridge, it's just going to be, again, just all out. All your wide receivers.
Go routes. Yeah.
Everybody go outs. Yeah. So I can assume that'll happen a bunch. Plus Pat Earls bring his throws from the Thunderbirds. That's more talent for Atlanta, who is, again, desperately, even with Tobias Brooks returning to Carolina, they want to be the team that not only gets there, but gets over the hump. Another season for them. And then the biggest news of the offseason for the league in general was Detroit and Los Angeles are no more.
That was on my list.
That moves Vegas to the South Division. So now you have 2 divisions, 6 teams. 2 divisions have 5 teams, which creates the opportunity, as you mentioned, for exploring interdivisional matchups. But yeah, we do pour one out for Detroit. Yes, they made history in their losing streak. I mean, what an incredible story in the league. I mean, I think that'll be a documentary made on them. Unfortunately, the heartbreaking losses after that car accident quite a few years ago, again, losing their players in such an awful way. And then with, again, the losing streak, but then finally breaking that losing streak. Now, was it last season or 2 seasons ago? The seasons blend together for me.
Last season.
Yeah. Last season, getting that win. And I would say not to say that a 1-win season is going out on top, but having lost for the previous half decade before that, getting that win, kind of cementing yourself in that place. But that does mean that, like buzzards, with the death of Los Angeles and Detroit, that means San Diego in particular was looking around the roster for Los Angeles and saying, hey, yeah, here, we've got a home for you. And then for Detroit, it was very much the rest of the Central, Madison and particularly Indy going, all right, Detroit, we're going to grab some of your best players and bring them in. So yes, for Detroit and Los Angeles, please, a quick eulogy from you.
I didn't really have anything for Los Angeles. Whatever, they were around for a bit. Whatever.
Detroit, I think there might be a Los Angeles franchise back in this league before Well, we'll be older and grayer, but I'd say, if you're a young player, if you're starting at 18, I think by the time your career is done, there will be another Los Angeles franchise. Would be my guess, just because there are certain locales that the league wants to have frisbee being played in, and Los Angeles is one of those. So I think once ownership groups are straightened out, and vice versa. So there's still some legal aspects of it, but yeah, I would say if I had to guess, between 6 to 8 years, if it's plausible, that frisbee might return to Los Angeles.
Yeah, my specific note, or just kind of a shout out, was going to be for Detroit. And I don't mean this harshly, to be that bad for so long, but to persevere and keep putting out a product every year, and to have like some buy-in from your community, and having people still want to play and show up, and just kind of, giving it your all, and eventually having the community kind of root for you to get a win. Yeah, it just showed a lot of resolve, and they were there from the beginning. I mean, without that ownership, right? Brent Steep, I believe. You know, who knows if there's a league? I mean, he was one of the original people who thought it was not super crazy to invest in professional ultimate frisbee. So, thank you for doing that. Here we are. Sorry you're not around anymore. I think when the news came that they folded, some of us were like actually disappointed. So, the league as a whole, the products on the field might be a little better without them. I hate to say that. But, I guess you stand on those who came before you, the shoulders of those who came before you.
Well, I mean, listen, to their point, like the investment that they put in that product in Detroit, being an original team. Salt Lake, remember, the Salt Lake Lions existed, folded, and then there was a new Salt Lake team years after the fact, and Detroit was still around and still doing their best and still putting it together.
Oh, they outlived a ton of teams.
Exactly. I mean, the Columbus Cranes still just exist in Keith Rayner's dresser and closet. And so, they, when it comes to teams in the Central. So yes, for Detroit. And I will say too, like, as people know, if you're listening to this, you understand that. So like frisbee and those in ownership, it's not a lucrative thing. You really truly, like, they pour their heart, their time, their money, in particular for ownership groups, money into a product that there is no financial guarantee, and most of the time it's huge financial losses. So for Detroit to show up and that ownership group can continue to pour in the investments year in and year out, understanding with their roster what that was probably going to wind up looking like. Again, that is a testament to pushing this league forward. So even if this next era of the league does not involve Detroit, you mentioned, not every team will say shape the face of the league, but Detroit did. So credit to them.
No notes.
Nothing else.
No. Yeah, okay.
Well, let's stick in the Central, because if I'm Detroit, I'm like, well, thank goodness now I don't have to face off against the new Minnesota, who added Defensive Player of the Year in Lucas Ambrose, last year's block leader in Noah Kuhlman Ambrose came from Seattle, Kuhlman coming from Colorado, and then the youngster Nathan DeMorgan, who came from Salt Lake. That is a huge trio of defense for Minnesota. And then Indy, it is hard. You want to talk about trying to put pieces together in limited practices. They've got a bunch of traveling players, which we've said there in the past. There's been highs and lows to how that's worked. But Jonathan Mass, James Pollard, I'm not going to do it in one breath. So let me take another breath here. Jonathan Mass, James Pollard, Xavier Payne, William Wettengel, Nate Little, Jeremiah Branson, Cam Brock, Carson Chamberlain, Joe Kubit, Jake Felton, Carter and Elliot Hawkins, London's Max Squires, Team USA U24's Isaiah Mason, and Content King Kai Creed. There are names that I mentioned to you that probably are not going to get the same burn. You know what I mean? Like, I named too many. Those are new players for Indy, so you can't have too many stars. Some of those players will take complementary roles, but they've just added talent. But let's see what their ceiling is going to be. And let's see how they fit all those pieces together, again, with a bunch of those names that I mentioned going to be in like these traveling pods and looking to put it together. So it'll be interesting to see how Indy puts that together.
Yeah, it's always tough when you can't practice or kind of just be around teammates throughout the whole year or ramping up into a season. Good players will find a way to play together and exist fine, and it's not going to look like, college ultimate out there, but it's not always easy to then beat a well-oiled machine filled with, 25 returners who, just added one or two good pieces. That it'll be tough. Speaking of mercenary rosters, though, I actually didn't even get a chance to look at the Vegas roster. Do we have anything super exciting out there?
Well, first, if we're going to the West,
because they can just fly in mercenaries. They should go all in on, we're flying in. I don't know, Chris Kotcher for the day. We're, Chris and Jimmy, they're going to run it back like it's 2016 and they're trying to take down the USA.
Well, I say when I say go out West, they're actually in the South. Remember, they're the team that moved this year.
Yeah.
But if we are going to stay, if we're going out to the West real quick, I want to mention Oakland and Salt Lake. Now, Seattle are kind of the question mark there, very much like we talked about DC. They just always seem to be able to put out, sometimes the wins and losses don't match, but the product they put out and the players they have, just Seattle always, you don't want to underestimate. But the Oakland and Salt Lake roster are just better than the rest of the teams out in the West. Dexter Clyburn has returned to play for Oakland team, who's, again, core, dominated the club game last season. That cannot be understated. Different games, different fields, but like if you are doing that much winning as a group, as a unit, and that often carries over to the UFA. And then Salt Lake brought back Simon Dastrup, Ben Hoffman, Johnny Hoffman, Joe Merrill, and Everett Sanders for a team that won 10 plus games for the fifth time or fourth time last season. This season would be the fifth time, or maybe fifth time, sixth time. Either way, you get my point. It looks like even in the West, it's going to be a two-player race. As I look at the Vegas roster here, Vegas, I want you to win a game this season. Let's put it that way. Looking at the roster, I want Vegas to win a game and cause some havoc, pun intended. Cause some havoc, growl at San Diego, fly against Carolina, take Austin Seoul. I don't know. I'm gonna have to charge for all of those. I'm gonna have to. All of those are, or out hustle the Atlanta. Whatever it is. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Vegas does. We do hope they get a victory, but at this point, Matt, unless you have any other notes, instead of scouring the Vegas roster, I think there are other things to talk about in coming weeks. And again, it'll be interesting to see if any other teams post roster deadline day add some names and how rosters will change. Again, we always mention before we have media day in about a month that there's one or two names that always kind of shuffle in or out and things like that. So we do know who's there, and we know and we know the teams that are being built and being solidified. So yeah, I mean, you and I are back, which is always a good thing.
We're back.
Yeah. All right. So we are back, and so is the excitement for the season that kicks off in just over a little bit of a month. So practices are ongoing. You see Antoine is already in good shape. So, I mean, Atkins, by the season starting, I think he'll catch him. And again, we're also with...
You think he'll catch him? I don't know. Antoine's fast.
I know. Well, that's just saying that Atkins is... maybe we're giving him the benefit of the doubt that Kins is in preseason form. And he'll
whatever. Even if you lose a race to Antoine, you could still be in pretty good shape. I don't know. I think it's all right.
Yeah. They've got long legs. They've got some. Empire are bigger. They're bigger now. There's some big bodies around this league, and
they're gonna need a few big boys. Yeah.
Yep. And then I want them to be working on the Axel Agami Contreras peekaboo, where because Axel's so much shorter than so many of the big dogs now on the team, where you kind of you run down the field and then you have Axel completely in your behind in the blind spot of the Giants. And then it's that peekaboo block where you come in from behind. So it's kind of like snake in the grass. It's which we've seen.
It's like when I'm not very big, so I used to kind of just like try and like half hide behind somebody.
Yeah.
I'm sure it never really worked, but if you're glancing quick and you think somebody's open, and then boom, there's the tiny person behind them. Maybe they get a block.
Yeah. Tiny people.
Maybe that's how Ben Katz always did it. Actually. Maybe it wasn't a timely sense of poaching. Maybe it was maybe he was hidden.
That's not true. I have a video on the channel, on the YouTube channel, which thank you, by the way, those on YouTube. We are over 1,000 subscribers now. So up and at it. So we finally got there, and we're excited to continue on this season. Yeah. The new season. Tad says congratulations, bobblehead Tad. All right. So for myself and Pippin and the entire Empire family, we of course will talk to you soon.